Excuse me. Okay, welcome to another Snow Only podcast. We're looking at what the best place is to buy ski real estate. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Thomas from Alpine Property Investments. And Steve yours a family-run business, isn't it, Steve? You and your wife?
Yes.
Family-run business. Steve's had 18 years experience selling ski real estate. And he's just told me out of roughly around 300 ski resorts, I assume, that you've been to almost 70%. I mean, that is a phenomenal stat. Yeah. So what Steve tells you is as good as you're going to get. So, Steve, I appreciate that it's a very broad question, but if we can kind of like work through, we can find out, family resorts, infrastructures to kind of give the listeners some advice based on your knowledge. I have 150 questions, and I think this could go on for 5 hours, but we'll try and keep it a nice 45 minutes. So, look. Best places to buy ski real estate. As I said, 300 ski resorts pretty much. I think we, first of all, tell us a little bit about your company and kind of what you do so we have some context of where it's coming from.
Okay, well, welcome. My name's Steve Thomas. I am one of the team at Alpine Property Investments and look after the sales side of things. We've been going for 18 years. We started, as Mark said, we are a family business, and we started the whole thing by purchasing a property in the Swiss Alps. This was back in 2006. We've been through the process. We understand what makes a good purchase, what makes a bad purchase, and we decided at the time that we wanted to help people in terms of purchasing a property in the mountains. And through our experience of understanding where to buy, what to buy, this is why we're on this call at the moment to to discuss some of the things that in essence we did ourselves when we purchased a property for ourselves.
Yeah. So I think obviously there's so many parameters to this in terms of the type of property, chalets, apartments, leasebacks, outright purchases, etc., etc. So in terms of the best places we're trying to kind of stick to here, what's the advice that you tend to give to people if they're looking for, maybe an investment purchase in terms of the best place to buy? What do you stick as like let's say the golden rule of options of people from a kind of general perspective? What's the advice that you would give people?
Okay, so if you're looking for an investment property, the main two things you're looking at are return on rental and return on capital. Some clients that we work with are very focused on rental income, while other clients are more geared towards looking at what the future holds for the particular resort, the ski domain, and the actual wider infrastructure. So if we look at rental first, we're not looking at rentals that are going to be 12 months. We're looking at dual seasons. So you're looking at incomes coming in through the winter and the summer months. And in terms of the best resorts, then obviously if you're only looking at 2 seasons, then you need to be looking at high occupancy levels and resorts where the demand for the property almost exceeds the supply of the property. And anywhere from 65 to 80% is normal for occupancy during the winter. Obviously there are some properties where you will experience 90, 95 and 100%, but on average, we would say typically you're looking in the winter months, 65 to, the 80% mark. In terms of the percentages, in terms of yields, you're looking at typically, anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5, maybe 5%. Net of agency fees, and that's obviously your management costs. And resorts that are particularly good at this tend to be those that are offering great skiing in the winter. They have good infrastructure for delivery of the, sort of the people to the resorts. So it could be close to an airport, it could be close to a train station, and obviously sort of the ski domain itself. In terms of the return on capital, that's slightly different in so much we're looking at more what is going on, sort of in the resort itself, or as I say, the wider area. In terms of Chatel, for example, a few years ago, the Port de Soleil used to be almost like a horseshoe. And what we saw in Chatel was the cost per square meter was around about 6,000 euros per square meter. They then actually circled the horseshoe there, whereas you no longer had to take the bus from Linga to Super Chatel. You could literally ski between the two, and we saw prices increase by 1,500, 2,000 per square meter. We have a similar situation which is going to be happening in Les Abels, and it's where I mentioned, Mark, it's before we started. It's where I ski every year now, and here the return on capital investment is going to be enormous over the coming years. And part of the reason for this is in the valley, they are building Europe's largest infrastructure project. It's a new international train station. Once it opens, it will actually connect Paris to Lyon, to Chambéry, to Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne, which is where this particular train station is being built. And then it will go through a tunnel that is going to be built to Turin and on to Milan. It'll mean that those in Paris to Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne are 3 hours away. From Turin to Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne are under an hour. And it will put resorts like La Tessuire within Les Abels, the closest ski resorts in relation to Paris and Turin and Milan, literally, sort of a stone throw away. And that will not only drive people wanting to invest in property there, but also it'll also drive people to actually come and rent property. So your occupancy levels are going to go up. And then the other thing that impacts, sort of the investment is if you have a resort that is only releasing 2 or 3 new projects every few years, then what that does is it drives the demand. And when you have demand, then obviously prices go up. So for example, in Vaujany, we're just launching at the moment a series of new chalets. And there hasn't been a chalet project in Vaujany within the Alpe d'Huez ski domain in over 3-4 years. So it comes as a natural extension that as you launch property, if you're not in a flooded market where there are 20 different developments that are being sold, the demand is there for these properties, and it obviously drives the the capital growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could stop the podcast now, can't we? Because you found the best place to buy ski property. So I think if anyone's listening, we did it. I just want to go back to something that you said earlier, because when we're talking about ROI in terms of the rentals, if you take maybe a resort that is almost maxed out and won't put in any more property, is that where you would advise people to buy now? In terms of you have, as you said, demand. So you have X amount of beds. Let's just do easy numbers. You have 1,000 beds in resorts, and you have X amount of people coming. If you take the other side of it and think, okay, you have a up and coming resort that's kind of like, maybe linking to a bigger ski domain, but they're still building and building and building, then obviously the ROI is going to be slightly different because there's always another bed to put someone in. So what would be your advice to people at the moment if they're looking for an ROI in a ski resort? Something that's kind of established and they're not building anymore, or something that's obviously a new up and coming resort where there's chance, maybe more capital, but yeah, like I said, something that's putting in new buildings and has potential, let's say.
I think it really comes down to who is visiting as well, because if it is a resort where families are coming, then you're actually sort of going to be drawing one of your biggest bases of client. I know, for example, in La Tissuère, which is where, as I mentioned, I ski, the ROI on rental for some apartments is 4 to 4.4%, which is incredibly high. That's net of agency. Now, the reason for that is because 75% of the clients that are coming to the resort are still French. They're not relying on the international market. So it's a difficult one to assimilate. I think if you're talking about a resort where there is a flood of new beds, then absolutely, you will see a dilution unless the marketing stream is such that you can bring more clients to fill those additional beds, then obviously you will have a dilution. So I think in an ideal world, you want a resort where it's close to the infrastructure of getting there. It has a good ski area. It has a long ski season. It's good for families. It's got, enough infrastructure to, to meet all of the demands. So families, for example, with young children, they want ski school. Older children will want the ski bars, etc. So it's trying to find the resorts that offer a tangible amount of infrastructure, as well as the clientele that come to the resort. And as I say, the French are the biggest clients that visit the ski resorts, and when you have 75% of those coming to Cibele still being French, and that's slowly changing. So we've got British buyers now in in the ski area. We've got Dutch buyers, we've got Belgian buyers, and 5 years ago I was in the resort and I didn't even hear English being spoken, but each year that I go back, we are now seeing English being spoken more and more frequently, to the point that the last time I was back earlier this year, I would go to a restaurant or a cafe or the supermarket. They all spoke English. But 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea.
No, I'm gonna push you on some names of resorts soon. What do you think it's imperative in today from a buyer's point of view? And if someone had to make, let's say, a sacrifice for a resort that they really want to be, do you think it's imperative that people need to buy in dual season resorts nowadays? Because the reason that I ask is that there was I had a very good chat a while ago with the guy who was talking about Val d'Isère. Now, Val d'Isère is a massive flagship resort, one of the best ski areas in the world, so iconic. And yet we were talking about the summer, and he was like, "Oh, it's just a bit cold and wet. Like nothing really happens in the summer." You're like, "That's crazy for such an iconic, appealing resort." But I think in terms of, we're talking about ROI and investment, I guess my question is it imperative that it has to be a dual season resort?
No. And the reason being is, if you're getting, let's say, 2,000 a week in the winter for your apartment, let's say a 3-bed apartment, 2,000 a week. In the summer, you may only be getting 500-600 a week. So the actual the dual season nature is great if you want a dual season base, but if your primary objective is to ski, then obviously you will come sort of for the winter, and you will get your biggest rental income in the winter. Now, as I say, the summer being dual season, you've got, you want some names. If you've got, sort of in Maribel, you've got a golf course. Courchevel, you've got a golf course. In Chamonix, you've got a golf course. In Megève, you've got a golf course. All of those are great in the summer because you've got, sort of the infrastructure there. Cycling, for example, you've got Morzine, you've got Léger for mountain biking. Le Dualp, again, mountain biking. Alpe d'Huez is famous for its hairpin bends. And the Moraine Valley dipping back into Sibel, it's the biggest road cycling network in the world. So you will always have a draw to some of these resorts. And it's interesting you mentioned Val d'Isère. I was in the Alps last summer when it was blisteringly hot in Greece, and sort of even in Lyon and the likes, it was sort of 36, 38 degrees. And I was in Val Thorens, and it was cold at 2,400 meters. And when I was talking to the guys there, I was saying, well, do you foresee there being a summer season? Because Val Thorens right now is winter. And my general feeling is there is going to be a shift, whereas some of these higher resorts, because they are naturally cooler, because the humidity levels are lower, yet they still have the sunshine, they are going to become more of a draw for the summer season. So going back to the rental, Val Thorens at the moment is winter, so there is next to no summer income or very little. But over the next few years, if Europe continues to cook, sort of in the valley, then obviously the natural progression will be to go, sort of to go higher. And 1850 Courchevel is another example there. Sort of 1850 up until 2 or 3 years ago was very much a winter destination. And I've been there in the past where I've struggled to even find a restaurant open to even grab a sandwich. But the last time I was there, it's interesting to hear that they are currently building a new hotel on the slopes. This hotel is going to have 10-month contracts for all its employees because it's going to be open for 10 months of the year, whereas all the other hotels shut. As soon as the winter's done, they close. Now, what is going to be interesting is a lot of these other hotels are going to be watching what happens to this new hotel and what clients are. And if they see the model working, it's only going to be a matter of time before they start switching their own contracts. So, as I say, the ROI on rental is a difficult one to define as far as, sort of, isn't it a dual season bonus? Because, sort of for Courchevel, Val d'Isère, the rentals in the winter are so high, it would balance smaller resort, sort of having some summer income, basically. So
I will ask you the question because it might be a little bit of a tangent, but while we're here and I've got you, I'll ask you. Do you think that the rental prices will ever be as high as the winter prices? Summer prices will ever be as high as the winter prices?
They're certainly increasing.
Because that would be that would be a huge game changer in terms of
and demand in the summer is definitely increasing. Resorts are realizing that sort of summer is not a wasted few months, but it's the sort of the primary draw for all ski resorts is sort of is the winter. One of the best resorts that does it sort of the best in the summer is Morzine. Sort of it is absolutely buzzing throughout the summer, sort of period. I think for sort of Morzine, sort of is one of these resorts that just literally has everything for the summer bar the golf course, but then Léger is just down the road. So anybody that wants to play around golf, they just go and sort of pop in a car, 15 minutes, they're in sort of in Léger. But it's something that resorts are doing more and more and more to draw customers for the summer.
Yeah.
Whether or not they will ever hit the levels of winter, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I definitely think they will increase, because as demand for the beds increase, then obviously it gives the sort of the agencies and the tour operators the opportunity to push their prices up a little bit. And on a tour operator basis, a lot of the tour operators right now only work in the winter. So they will take property just for the winter season. And then, if you want to rent it in the summer, it's not through a tour operator. It has to be done through, sort of either by yourself or through a local agency. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mentioned Morzine. It's such an appeal from our sites that people are always inquiring for Morzine. It kind of segues onto a question that I had in terms of locality of ski resorts, in terms of the best one to buy ski is. Do you think that, I always kind of come back to it, the more people you speak to, the more people tell us about international investors, rather than kind of having, let's say, primarily an English market that they can kind of feed into. Now people are coming from Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, even Middle East, etc. Is being by Geneva imperative? Or do you think that obviously someone like Val d'Isère, I guess, is give or take, what was the last time we did it, 3.5 hours or something like that? Maybe it's obviously not a bad investment to be in Val d'Isère, but do you think that in terms of drive, there'll be more for the likes of Morzine and Chamonix? We know is obviously very popular because it's close to Geneva.
I think if your flight hall carriers deliver to primarily Geneva, then obviously it has an appeal. If you're based in and around, let's say, Surrey, or sort of the counties around Heathrow or Gatwick, and you want to go out for a weekend, sort of getting on a plane on Friday, coming back on a plane on Monday, then obviously the last thing you want to be is stuck in a car for 2.5 or 3 hours. Sort of the likes of Morzine, Leger, Chamonix, Saint-Gervais, Samois, Le Carreau, they're all within 75 minutes of Geneva Airport. And, it draws a lot of people. If you've got young children and, sort of, the old adage, how much further, how much longer? The last thing you want to be doing is, sort of, a lot of people don't want to do is to hike them for 3 hours in sort of in a car. But it doesn't put a lot of people off. Sort of a lot of people, sort of want to be in the Espace Killy, so in Tignes, in Val d'Isère, in the Three Valleys, and the occupancy levels wouldn't be as high from international visitors if people didn't want to be there. I think sort of the likes of the Porte du Soleil, the Grand Massif, the Majewski area, for example, again, it comes down to when you want to come. If you want to come right at the beginning of the season or at the end of the season, probably not the best time to, sort of to come to these areas. But if you want to come in, sort of January, February, March, absolutely brilliant. If you want to come, though, to grab the first week of skiing at, let's say, first week of December, then obviously you want to go to Les Alpes, you want to go to Alpe d'Huez, you want to go to Val Thorens, you want to go to Val d'Isère, you want to go to Tignes, and those resorts are higher. And you don't have those high resorts around Geneva. So it really comes down to, sort of the client's choice in terms of, when they're coming, what they're looking for in terms of their, sort of their skiing. Do they want to ski at 3,000 meters and above? Are they happy skiing on the Porte du Soleil at 2,500 meters? So it again, it's a real mix of, sort of answers in terms of, individuals are individual.
Do you ever see, is there anything that you can suggest to people that are listening about we all know about the flagship resorts, right? The likes of Teen and Valdezere and Meribel and Courchevel and Baltwen and so on and so forth. Is there any of the kind of, let's say, the satellite resorts or the maybe lesser known resorts that you can see that's maybe developing their infrastructure that in the next maybe 5 or 10 years could become one of the flagship resorts that people maybe not know about it? Or do you think it's just set in stone that these resorts will always be the flagship resorts?
I don't know whether you'll ever better in terms of flagship, the likes of 1850, the likes of Val d'Isère, the likes of Megève. And that's because they are iconic, for want of a better description. They are world-renowned, sort of the billionaires and the millionaires come and they buy property there, and they, sort of one of our company philosophies is, sort of invest in lifestyle. So it's an investment, but at the same time, it's the lifestyle. And people who know these resorts, sort of they know the bars they want, they know the restaurants they want, they know the skiing. So when they put a set of skis on and head up the chalets, they know exactly where they're going. If you are, however, a client that is, sort of, for example, not with a budget of 30,000 euros, 40,000 euros per square meter, then, and even sort of, in the likes of Alpe d'Huez, where, sort of in the resort, we're at about 14.5, 15, maybe 16,000 euros per square meter. There are smaller resorts where you can be and still access the Alpe d'Huez ski domain. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, Vaujany. Vaujany is a dual season resort. It's very traditional, very quaint, very popular. And it has its cable car, which goes to 2,800 meters. So while the resort is only at 1,250, and if the cable car wasn't there, and it wouldn't open first week of December, but because it has the cable car taking you to 2,800 meters, you can literally start when the ski area opens. And from there, one red slope, you're at the Pic Blanc lift. That takes you to 3,300 meters, and off you go to La Sereine, and the most scary run that I've ever done, and that's the Le Tunnel, sort of black slope. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in the bigger resorts to get the, to get the property. So, for example, in Vaujany, the new project we're launching, we're going to be around 10, maybe 10.5, maybe 11,000 euros per square meter. So you're somewhere in the region of 4,000 less. And then if we come back to what I was saying about Les Belles, so this is a hidden gem. I've got to be honest, I talk about this in my podcasts on a regular basis. The ski area is the 4th largest in the French Alps. It is the 7th largest in Europe, yet it is the hidden gem. And 2 of the big resorts there are Saint-Solin-d'Arve and Le Tisserre. And they are 1,650, 1,750 meters in height, so they have good height. The ski, they're ski sure because all of the connections across the 6 villages are above 2,000 meters. And there in Saint-Solin, so the last project we had cost per square meter of 6,500 euros per square meter. Compare that to Val d'Isère, where some of the projects are, say, 30, 35, 40,000 euros per square meter. So, and it is a like for like finish. We're talking old wood, we're talking natural stone. So, the one thing that I would say to your listeners is, if you're thinking about buying a property, if a budget doesn't allow you to be in Val d'Isère, we at Alpine Property Investments spend a lot of time talking to a client to try and understand some of the questions we've spoken about. Are you a family? Do you want to be close to an airport? When do you want to ski? And it allows us to build a picture. And that's why I spin back to the 70% of the ski resorts. I'm a great believer you cannot do this job sitting behind a desk. I'm in the Alps 3 times a year. I'm actually on site looking at projects, looking in sort of new resorts, trying to understand where lifts are, what is being built, and sort of tying back to another part of one of your questions in terms of infrastructure and beds. It's not always about, sort of apartment buildings. Sort of, for example, in Sibel, there are 2 new cable cars that are being built, also that will improve the delivery up into the top of the mountain, but also will make the connection for those that are, let's say, for example, not as intrepid skiers, to be able to get from point A to point B a lot quicker, basically. So it doesn't always have to be about, sort of Val d'Isère, Courchevel 1850. In the 3 valleys, yes, you have Courchevel and you have Maribel. People overlook a lot of the time Le Menuire and Saint Martin de Belleville. Sort of,
well,
and they
it's not as sexy for people, is it, when they're building, having these lifestyle purchases, and they want to say where they own a property, isn't it? I think there's certainly something in that. Can I just ask Steve, something that's kind of interesting for me is when we look at I always kind of like to do the let's say the satellite resorts versus the flagship resorts. In terms of an appreciation, I'll just give some numbers, but it's obviously an approximation. If you look at somewhere like, I can't even think now, Le Menuire or somewhere like that, where let's, for example, say it's 10,000 euros a square meter, and let's say that the flagship resorts are up to 30,000 euros a square meter. In terms of an appreciation per year, would you say that the satellite resorts would appreciate quicker than the flagship resorts? So in terms of kind of an investment, would you look at the satellite resorts that are, as you said, maybe 6,000 to 10,000 euros a square meter, purely as an investment, and go, okay, the infrastructure they're putting into this and it's accelerating has the potential to go up to 15,000, which is obviously quite a hike. Whereas, let's say, a flagship resort at 30,000 really only has the potential to go up to 32,000, for example. Would you say that was like for like across the board, or not really?
I think, again, it comes down to supply, sort of, and where the projects are. So in your flagship resorts, then if you have got a project that is sitting on the piste, that sort of, and there isn't anything else like it, then developers can push the price to sort of to reflect that. And so people are buying it because sort of there is so little that is sort of, for example, ski in and out. So that can have an influence. As a percentage, though, sort of, obviously, if you're dealing at 10,000 euros per square meter versus 35,000, 40,000 euros per square meter, then a small price increase at 10,000 euros per square meter is going to give you a higher percentage ROI than sort of, you've got to have a more substantial price increase in the flagship resort. So I think for me, it's more about, if you're looking at ROI, then it is, and that is on capital, then it is more about what is going on in the resort that is going to bolster the actual income. So, for example, sort of, if you look at sort of Chatel, sort of, it had the sort of the new lifts and the new pistes that sort of, that now means you don't need to take the bus through the between the two the two parts. That pushed the price, as sort of the sort of the new aqua center there was built and opened. That helped push the sort of the price up. So it sort of, it's a complex jigsaw puzzle to actually be able to predict where sort of you're going to see sort of increases in prices. I'm conscious I keep talking about Sibel, but sort of there, for example, this new international train station is going to just completely transform the whole area.
No,
Anybody that
I don't
anybody that
doubt it. It sounds good.
anybody that is thinking, sort of at the moment in, sort of in Saint-Salin, we were at 6,500 euros per square meter. I envisage the next project that is launched there will be at 7,500. So you're immediately talking in 18 months a 1,000 euro, 1,500 euro per square meter increase. And
Like 12,
it's
13%.
basically,
Yeah.
it's a very high percentage, whereas if you're trying to see the same in one of the flagship resorts, you're looking at, sort of pushing the price 5, 6, 7,000 euros per square meter. And yes, there are projects where, like I said, if you have a flagship project in a flagship resort in an incredible location, then people will want to be in that location, and therefore, so it may come at a cost in terms of, for the developer to have bought the land to build the project. He may be having to put roads in, tunnels in, sort of infrastructure. So therefore, he has to capture that money back in terms of pushing his, cost per square meter up. So, sort of the key thing for clients to take from this is you don't have to spend 40,000 euros per square meter. If you are looking for, sort of lifestyle in the mountains and you are looking at investment in the mountains, it is, and so we talk about, obviously we've been talking today about France, then you don't have to be buying, sort of in the flagship resorts, and that's why we're here to help, to try and piece together with the client what it is that they, sort of they want and are looking for.
I think that it's good that you always refer back to the infrastructure in terms of obviously which you have with the train links coming in. I think it's why it's important to speak to specialists like you that can, if people are unsure of where they want to purchase in terms of investment, having a resort that is improving its infrastructure in terms of access in terms of the cable cars, etc., etc. It's imperative to the price of their investment going upwards, right? If you buy into a nice property, but then they're not going to do anything for the chairlift for the next 20 years, people are not going to go to the resort, isn't it? So it's imperative that one of the questions that I had actually before in terms of the infrastructure, are people asking you about things like schooling and hospitals in terms of resort, in terms of the infrastructure? Is that a demand or it's not really on the forefront of people's mind? I can't imagine it's on the forefront, but everywhere I've kind of lived, and there's some conversation in skiing, is that people are just tending to spend maybe a little bit more time over there, or they're worried about those kind of things being easily accessible to them. Would you say that would help a resort?
We sort of, the type of client we're dealing with are those more that are tourist travelers. So they are buying the property. A lot of our clients have children at school, so they come at Christmas, they come at New Year, they come at the February half-term week, and then they come in the summer holidays. So from our model, we don't tend to have that many questions asked about, sort of hospitals and schools. Obviously, you get asked about pharmacies, sort of, and doctors, or, so we can be, sort of asked about that. But again, it tends to be, sort of a little bit more of a rarer question. Sort of clients are more interested in how many kilometers there is it challenging skiing, what percentages are blues, reds and blacks, how far is it from Lyon airport, or if I catch a plane into Turin, is it easier to get from Turin to a particular, sort of ski resort? And those tend to be more the questions that are asked at the sort of dealing with it from a living there, or sort of from a hospital point of view. Where we do tend to get asked questions is, well, I'm thinking of sort of semi-retiring in
Yeah.
sort of 5 years or so. Sort of what is there for me in the resort, sort of that I can sort of look forward to when I spend more time there. Do I have enough restaurants that are going to keep me entertained? Has it got sort of the golf course? Has it got a leisure centre? Has it got a gym? Has it got a spa? Sort of, because when you're there without sort of someone's children, sort of you are once again more as an adult, and sort of the questions that those clients that are thinking of retiring, they are more pertinent than sort of the questions that I would be asked more about hospitals and doctors and surgeries and so forth.
Do you get many people? You don't have to tell me this, of course. Do you get many people buying sight unseen? And actually, I don't mean that in terms of the property. I mean it in terms of the ski resorts. When you were asking about, when you were saying, are there a lot of blue runs? Are there a lot of green runs? Are there a lot of red runs? I find it really interesting that people would consider buying into a resort when they have never skied it, because I kind of feel like skiing is such an emotional purchase for people, and they make these memories in Maribel or whatever it is, and it's the only place that they will buy because that's where they've had all their good experiences. So do you have people that are buying ski resorts that have never been to the ski resorts before?
Yep, absolutely. If we go back to COVID, we sold a number of properties where the client never visited. Now, some clients will know a resort, so all they'll want to do is a video visit of the site, and to just the camera pan them around just to make sure there's not that ugly building that's sitting right next to them, or something is going to be built right in front of them. But we also had clients that had never been. Sort of one of my podcasts.
I can understand. I can understand that. I know the ski resort just showed me around the property, but not that I've never been to the ski resort. That's a great one. That's a new one for me. I
think sort of we're living in a tech world now, so you can spend so much time, sort of looking at, sort of the ski head forums, Google Street View, Google reviews, sort of TripAdvisor, sort of, and all of these different components can start to help you build a good feel for a particular resort. And as I say, in COVID, I've got a podcast where we interview a client who actually bought during COVID, could not travel, and they literally bought on research that they did. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, if you can travel and you can visit and you can come and see a resort for yourself, brilliant. But if you are like now and you are seeing property that you want to buy that will not be there this winter, then you have a decision to make. Do you actually proceed without having done the skiing, or do you take the plunge and actually sort of buy? Sort of back in La Tessuire this this winter, we had a guy that we've been working with for about 4.5 years, and sort of we bounced many resorts, many ideas around. He came, managed to do half a day skiing because the sort of the weather was atrocious, and on that half day skiing, sort of he bought sort of an apartment. So you could argue, yes, he sort of he experienced the sort of the skiing, but he was only skiing literally locally. He couldn't access the whole ski area because the weather was sort of as poor as it was. And it really comes down to sort of, again, a trust thing. And it spins back to what I was saying. This is why I go to resorts. This is why I go and see the projects. This is why I go to look at, sort of where lifts are, how pistes all work, talk to people, ski different places. It's so when I talk to clients, I can actually give them the actual genuine, true, full fact information that they have that, sort of confidence that sort of that they're buying. And the other thing, of course, Mark, is don't forget, if you are renting a place out, so you've bought the place and you decide you want to rent it out, you don't always have to go to the place that you've bought. If that week is then rented, you can actually use that rental income to go off to another resort. So you're not tied specifically to sort of a ski area. And again, it's about 310 kilometers. You could argue, oh my goodness, why would people buy there if they've not skied? But 40 minutes from Le Tisserre, you're at the Orel cable car, and most people, and I say most, I use that generally, but a lot of people will have skied the three valleys. At Orel, you take the cable car to 3,200 meters at Cime Caron. You then ski off into, sort of down into Val Thorens, and you're off into the three valleys. So, sort of it isn't always about, sort of understanding the particular ski place you're buying. Another example is Champagny-en-Vanois. Which is in the Paradisky ski domain. It could well be that nobody's skied in the Paradisky before, but they've skied the three valleys, Latania and Courchevel, 20 minutes in the car, so they know they've got the comfortable confidence that they can buy in a particular resort because they can access other, sort of other resorts as well, basically.
Yeah. Steve, I knew this was going to happen. We're 46 minutes in, and I feel like we're going forever. But we have to put it to a close at some point. So just to kind of summarize, right, we've talked about kind of investment properties, a place for families, flagship versus satellite, infrastructure, airports, hospitals, dual season, altitude, some sort of appreciation. I kind of get the impression from you in terms of, let's answer the question, where are the best place to buy ski real estate? That actually the forefront is in terms of infrastructure, in terms of maybe current infrastructure in the resort or potential for infrastructure. Would you, and that applies to whichever resort is kind of offering. Would you say that was kind of the number one point for people to consider if they're looking for a ski property investment? That would be the number one.
80%, I would say 80 to 85% of our clients are looking to rent. So the first and foremost is it has to be a resort that's got a good rental track record.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you buy, a property in the UK or in Greece or, sort of in Dubai or wherever, you're always looking, even though you go into the purchase, sort of as a lifestyle acquisition, you're always looking for the property to grow in value. So that's another, sort of another factor. But you're right, sort of the putting the ROIs and the investment to one side. Once you've deduced that you want a good capital appreciation, you want a good rental income, then you move back into, okay, what is the resort going to give me as an individual? Am I a party animal? Am I sort of with a young family and we prefer hiking and cycling more so than skiing? So we may come for a week in the winter, but we're going to be using the property more for 4 or 5 weeks in the summer months. And, sort of again, going back to the ROIs, we therefore want to rent it in the winter. So there's no two people have the same set of criteria. Some clients want huge ski areas. So the Porte du Soleil and the Three Valleys tick those boxes, 600 plus kilometers across in each of them. And that just meets their requirements. They are powder, sort of piste bashers, and they want to traverse from one side to the other and be back for dinner. And
That's their ego. That's their ego, Steve. That's what it is. They think they can cover it in a week.
But they're not going to be happy in a smaller ski domain. So so this is what I was saying. It's a real mix of understanding, sort of, and Leslie and I did exactly the same thing. When we started out on our journey, we we worked out where we wanted to wanted to be and why we wanted to be there, and then we set about finding the property. And that's what a large part of our initial call is. It goes without saying, the budget cuts out resorts. If you're looking at wanting to be in Val d'Isère and you have only got 500,000 to spend and you want 4 bedrooms, then you have to be realistic. It isn't going to be possible. But we have lots of other resorts which are just as good, which will meet the client's requirements just as well. So if they want liveliness, it's got liveliness. If it's got beginner skiing, it's got beginner skiing. If it's got extreme skiing, it's got extreme skiing. So this is why it is paramount to talk to the clients and understand what they're they're looking for.
Yeah, and then you can advise them which is the best for what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. We'll give them a list. One thing I would say when you come to do any clients come to do any inspection visits, they need to narrow to a couple of resorts. Don't arrive looking at visiting 10, 12 different resorts, because I have seen it time and time again. They'll come in the summer and they'll say, oh, I have to come back in the winter, or vice versa. The best thing to do, I can recommend, is to narrow the search to a ski area or to a couple of resorts. And ultimately, if you do not find the right property, at least you have found the right resort. We all know curb appeal. It's not just about turning up at a property and actually saying this is the right property for us. Curb appeal applies as soon as you drive or take the bus into the resort, or however you get there. You will know straight away. You will have a feeling as to whether something works for you.
Oh yeah, funny enough, I have that feeling in Val d'Isère. Every time I get there, it is a feeling of just like, I'm going to have the best week of my life. I don't know why it doesn't happen for any other resort. Okay, Steve, I think we've covered everything. But before you go, I'm gonna. This is just a complete general bit of fun. I won't take your word for it. You're not allowed to say the same resort. I will say we are doing the best ski resort. I will say the best dual season resort. Give me a resort. Okay, we've got 10 to go through. Are you ready?
Dual season. That's such a difficult one. I
just need one. I need one word. I don't need a description. I'm going to say dual season. We're going to do quick fire. You ready? Okay. Dual season.
Morzine.
For families.
Vosgeny.
For skiing.
Letizia.
For investment.
Saint-Celandave. Oh no!
For
ask me that one again.
For investment.
Les Sabel.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Convenience.
Geneva.
Après.
Val d'Isère.
Scenery.
Samoa.
Snowshore.
Teen.
Oh, good one. Tradition.
Oh, I can't say the same one. Say Chevalier.
And your favourite?
I'm going to have to say it. Letizia.
Perfect. Steve, thank you so much for all your time and your knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Steve, just before we go, tell me a bit about your podcast. Where can people find it?
It is accessible via our website at www.alpinepropertyinvestments.co.uk. There is a podcast link in the top left-hand corner, and I will give you the podcast link to post in the show notes as well, Mark.
Perfect. We will add that below. Steve, thanks for all of your knowledge today. I'm sure it helps.
Thank you very much.
If it helps one person, we're doing a good job, but really appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.